My name is Ankit Kumar, and I'm based at the Department of Geography at this very university. And today I want to talk a little bit about an article I wrote with a colleague from Luxembourg Institute for Socioeconomic Research. It came out about a year and a half ago, and today I will take you through some of what we talked about in that article. So let's get started. So the rise in the purchase of community energy in the last decade in Europe, and then its subsequent seepage into many parts of the global south, we find both counterintuitive and unsurprising from post-colonial perspective. So this whole talk will be sort of sketched around drawing from post-colonial theory or particular strands of post-colonial theory that draw from Indian history. This is counterintuitive because from a post-colonial thinking, the annihilation of community is a regular feature of capital. In capitalist modes of production, capital needs to separate surplus labor from other relationships of social production, such as community. The community discourse is also unsurprising because community within the community energy discourse is an emergence or imagination of an idealized community, one that is compatible with capital rather than incompatible with capital. This is not a primordial community of kingship, rather a modern one of contract. This community comes together through common contracts and invests, crowdsources, and manages capital together within various projects. So the paper that I talked about is this paper in Antipode. It's available open access for people to read. So here we challenge the existing understanding of community within the literature, within the community energy literature, rereading this with post-colonial theory. We counterpoise community as contract with the idea of community as solidarity. So our argument is towards community as solidarity. Community energy schemes and their scholarly representations often do not start with the idea of solidarity. Our argument is that the forms of community that exist within community energy can all be seen as and are regularly analyzed and promoted as community as contract. So individuals coming together in a contract. That is a form of togetherness that is entered into for some sort of productively pursued ends. So for example, living well together in a place, pursuing a common task, aggregating given identities into a totalizing manner. We identify post-colonial understanding of community as fluid bonds of solidarity that align and realign differently around different purposes. And I'll give you some examples of that today. Following Partha Chatterjee, we take solidarity as a placeholder for reciprocal relationships of subjective morality and responsibility towards one another that binds humans together. That is often, but not exclusively, expressed as ethnicity, caste, or political belief. So today I'll focus, so this paper has case studies from India and Scotland, but today I'll focus on India, where we see the changing boundaries of community through recontextualizing and making fluid pre-existing boundaries of solidarity in different instantiations. Community can be continually reinterpreted depending on context. So I'm sure you all are quite aware and familiar with the community energy literature. There are just 4 points that I want to raise to summarize this. The first, that community energy cases are predominantly drawn until now from Northwestern Europe, and this project is a great example of breaking that bound. So they're primarily drawn from Northwestern Europe, echoing energy geography as a whole being primarily global north-centered. Much of the community energy work concerns the challenge of getting schemes up and running, and these challenges may be legislative, financial, and administrative. And the third point is that reflecting a relatively narrow range of empirical examples and spaces from where community energy theory has been built, community energy is overly wedded to Western and particularly English language understanding and applications of community. So the word itself, the idea of community itself, is very much embedded in an Anglophone idea. Community, and the fourth point is that community within the community energy discourse is largely one, location-based, for example, a local energy grid project, and two, community of choice, that is consciously opted into, for example, an energy cooperative. So you can be location-based or you can consciously opt to go into a community. Now, within the post-colonial thinking, so how do we sketch out this post-colonial idea of community? So we follow Partha Chatterjee and Dipesh Chakraborty's work to apply post-colonial analysis of the idea of community. There's a wide array of literature arguing that the Western concept of community aggregating together is often based on a mutual interest or preference. Community is often imagined either simply spatially, as I said, everyone living in the same village or neighborhood, or based on Western liberal ideas as individuals who join together into alliances on the base of common interest or shared preferences. And so this community energy discourse, then we summarize this as community, as contract. We propose that in addition to individual interests, pre-existing and forged solidarities play an important role. Community often already exists and functions to pursue particular interests. These interests are not only particular liberal individual interests such as post-materialistic values, they often concern maintaining community cohesion and its othered outsiders. So it's not just about maintaining particular kinds of individual interests of gaining from a project, but also it could be about maintaining the community itself through these projects. Or a community, their community, and also those who are outside those community. Therefore, rather than questioning whether community manifests itself through common individual interests or pre-existing bonds, working with post-colonial theory, we see community manifesting in particular contexts as a combination of the two. So I'll elaborate briefly on post-colonial idea of community to provide a conceptual background of what I'm going to discuss empirically in a moment. So scholars in both West and Global South commonly conceptualize the structure of community in the Global South as pre-modern and non-secular, and modern and secular in the West. But Dipesh Chakraborty counters such essentialized notions by arguing that the Indian modernity is shaped by a mesh of Western and local ideas. Some central tenets of Western modernity, such as subjects with individual property rights and autonomy, meld together with local practices and traditions. Yet, the individual is also shaped by their community attachments. Looking into the history of peasant resistance in colonial Bengal, Partha Chatterjee posits that community solidarities did not result from common individual interests. Rather, existing bonds that tie people together motivated peasants to act as a collective. Opposed to the dominant Western idea of common contractual obligations resulting from contract among individuals, collective action here resulted from shared identities derived from the membership of a community. Chatterjee clarifies that community cannot be immediately reduced to determinate social institutions like caste or religion, and that communities have a certain ideological resilience and innovativeness, capable of a range of transformations that help navigate varying contexts. The point here is that while caste and religion influence the limits of community action, they are not determinant of those actions. This is because the boundaries of solidarity, the lines separating the we from the they, can shift according to changing contexts of the struggle. These lines of solidarity change based on different instances of us versus them. Therefore, while community reveals solidarity, it also reveals, as Ranjit Guha reminds us, othering. So, togetherness, but also othering. Community includes just as it excludes. The empirical material demonstrates that these lines of solidarity. What it elucidates is an understanding of community through the relationship built on mutual identity and differences of social groups. Moreover, these mutual identities and differences evolve according to the context of struggle or action, and therefore the boundaries of community change. This challenges the idea of a liberal community based solely on shared individual interests, but also challenges the idea that once community is formed, it is harmonious and stable. So, just to summarize this discussion, there are 4 points to take forward. First, that while social institutions like caste, class, and religion shape community action, they are not determinate because the lines of solidarity shift based on changing contexts. Community sits in a complicated space that is neither liberal, based only on individual choices or emergent shared interests, nor stable and illiberal, that is staying congealed only around traditional and social institutions. And that community in particular contexts manifests as a combination of common individual interests and pre-existing bonds. This makes community both emancipatory and exclusionary, often at the same time. This simultaneously occurring of solidarity and othering reveals a politics of/in the community. And that politics I want to discuss with you with these Indian case studies today. So the story that I'm going to tell you today plays out in two villages. One is called Bijuria and the other is called Saharia. And these are in Bihar, in the province of Bihar, in the eastern part of India, in a district called Lakhisarai. The main caste groups in Bijuria are Bhumiyars, Yadavs, and Dalits. So Bhumiyars are upper caste, higher caste, Yadavs are lower caste, and Dalits are the ex-untouchable groups who are widely discriminated socially, politically, economically in India. And Saharia is predominantly higher caste with only few lower caste families. Hopefully you'll remember that. An energy scheme called Lighting a Billion Lives set up a solar lantern charging station capable of charging 50 to 60 lanterns, this one, in the house of local entrepreneurs in both these villages. The entrepreneurs then rent these lanterns to villagers daily or monthly. The lanterns are meant to provide access to clean lighting to the whole village. In both villages, the entrepreneurs are higher caste males. In Saharia, most lanterns are regularly rented and the scheme runs well, when I was there at least. In Bijuria, many lanterns have fallen into disrepair. Few are rented and the entrepreneur now uses some of the solar panels from the charging station to run domestic appliances in his house. Both villages are connected to India's national electricity grid. Electricity transformers that were part of the national grid network become a part of the community rather than a state project, because the state is either absent or only partially present in these villages. Once installed, the state seldom maintains the local infrastructure and its upkeep often rests on the local community. Local communities initiate repair and maintenance of electricity transformers that are part of the national electricity grid system, putting them in the realm of community energy initiative, at least in our analysis. In 2012-13, a group of young men in Bijuria initiated a money collection campaign to purchase their own transformer for the village. They saw this as a community endeavor where everyone was supposed to pitch in, because once they installed their own transformer, the electricity grid network, the whole village could derive benefits from it. Saharia had successfully achieved their own transformer. However, it often broke down and the village community took it upon themselves to repair every time. Such repairs were funded by money collection campaigns and contributions from all families of the village. So that's the Lighting a Billion Life project. And this is, for example, a transformer that was being installed, small transformers that were being installed as part of the rural electrification program in India. So what happens in these two cases? How do we trace community in these two energy projects? So Brij Kumar, a higher caste male, runs the solar lamp charging station in Saharia village. Most funding for the charging station comes as grants through corporate social responsibility and state schemes for electrification of the village community. The village is connected to India's national grid, but the electricity supply is intermittent. Therefore, a stable demand of solar lanterns exists. However, only 50 lanterns serve a village of 276 households. Most of Kumar's customers are higher caste families. So this is the location of the two systems, and that's the higher caste neighborhood, and this is the Dalit neighborhood over here. So you can see the spatial difference. Most of Kumar's customers are higher caste families. A reason for this is the socio-spatial distribution of caste neighborhoods in Indian villages. And this is often how Indian villages are sort of spatially laid out, with Dalit families living almost outside the boundary of the village. Higher caste families are spatially more proximate to the entrepreneur, and people from other caste neighborhoods have to walk further to get the solar lanterns. A key factor behind most customers being higher caste is also the fact that the entrepreneur prioritizes those with whom he has stronger bonds of solidarity, so bonds of kingship in this case, based on historical and cultural relationships of caste, where most people from the same caste in a village, and sometimes with people from neighboring villages, trace their lineages to the same ancestors. The higher caste entrepreneur's customers are also his kin, his family members. This gives them a preference. This is a prioritization of own community while othering some who are part of the village community, right? So all these people are part of the village community, but then lines are drawn differently in this case of the community. This shows that community is internally multiple, but also that boundaries of community shift and evolve based on pre-existing lines of enlacement, such as caste, leading to both inclusion and exclusion. And some of this complication becomes even more apparent when we talk about the electricity transformers. So Bijuria village was first electrified in 1967. Since then, the national grid electricity infrastructure broke down and required repair more than once. In 2011, Bijuria was re-electrified under the Indian government's village electrification scheme. Two small transformers were installed in the Dalit colonies. So they were installed mainly for below poverty line families, and most of the below poverty line families are these Dalit families. So these transformers were installed in the Dalit colonies to supply electricity only to below poverty line families, most of whom are Dalits and other lower castes. However, most higher caste families connected to the transformers forcefully. A group of higher caste elderly male told me, "It's a government thing. There's no one to stop us." In Saharia, we saw that the solar lamps were for the whole village community, but higher caste families monopolized them. Here, the electricity was for these below poverty line families, most of whom are Dalits. Even so, higher caste families requisitioned it. This resulted in overloading and breakdown of the electricity infrastructure. Everyone was left without electricity. At the time of my fieldwork, some higher caste males were collecting monetary contributions from villagers to purchase a higher capacity electricity transformer from the black market and to pay bribes to electricity department officials to install it. This was not going as well as some had expected. The higher caste coordinators of this exercise expected every household to contribute 300 rupees, regardless of their caste or economic status. The higher caste men who saw the acquisition of this transformer as a community endeavor complained that many Dalits refused to pay. As opposed to the solar lantern rental, here higher caste men drew the line of community as the whole village. Yet, the state previously provided transformers only for below poverty line, and they refused to accept that line that the state had drawn. However, Dalits that I spoke to drew the line of community as below poverty line. It was clear to them that only below poverty line families were allowed to participate in the transformers installed as part of the government's electrification program. Many Dalits found it unreasonable and unjust that they should pay for a new transformer while the state had allotted them one. One higher caste man complained that Dalits were not ready to pay for the new transformer because they wanted their own transformer. This They hoped that the government would either fix the existing below poverty line transformers or install a new one. Therefore, while higher caste families drew on an expanded idea of community to further their claims on the below poverty line transformers, and then appealed to a village level solidarity to fund a new transformer, the Dalits saw through this politics of solidarity and refused to play ball, in this case of money collection. In Saharia, the story of community and electricity transformer played out differently. Saharia was electrified in 1965. Since then, unlike Bijuria, the national grid infrastructure in the village never fully broke down. In a subsequent round of electrification, distribution wires were extended to the Dalit habitations. There is no separate transformer for the below poverty line or Dalit neighborhoods. One transformer in the village serves everyone. Many higher caste families are formal customers of the state electricity department and receive electricity bills. Most Dalit families do not have formal electricity connections. Nevertheless, they use electricity from the national grid. Even though Dalits are not formal customers, they claim their share in the community transformer by helping with its upkeep. The transformer was initially brought to the village through everyone's contributions and now is maintained through everyone's contributions. Here, the community line was never redrawn based on above poverty line, below poverty line, higher caste, and lower caste for only for grid electrification. We saw something different in the case of solar lanterns. For the solar lanterns, the lines of socio-spatial community were explicitly redrawn and maintained. Although imagined through the liberal lens as by project developers or funders, community reveals itself very differently in these different instances. These communities of solidarity align and realign differently around different purposes, whether it's solar lantern or national grid, which has multiple transformers or a single transformer. While higher caste families dominate the solar lanterns meant for the whole village in Saharia, all social groups drew electricity from the central grid by participating in the maintenance of the network. The same central grid network sees a more fragmented idea of the village and alignment of community around caste lines in Bijuria. This is partially due to the different socio-material histories of national grid in two villages. So in Saharia, the national grid, the state never allotted electricity transformers for below poverty line families, most of whom are Dalits. In Bijuria, it did. So that history also comes to play quite a bit in this. While the story largely follows pre-existing solidarities that align and realign around changing instances of we versus them, it adds a critical corollary of thinking through relationships of power. And that's where the question of justice comes. In both the solar lanterns in Saharia and the central grid in Bijuria, members of higher caste who hold more social, economic, and political powers opportunistically limit the community lines to their own kin to exclude others, or extend it to the whole village to include themselves. In Bijuria, Dalit families resist by refusing to contribute to higher caste community endeavor of buying a greater capacity transformer. So to conclude, the argument here that we put in this paper is that there are two broad uses of community prevalent in the community energy literature. One is location-based and the other is chosen by choice. And so these two broad uses of community energy can be seen as and are regularly analyzed as community as contract. Community here is a form of togetherness that is entered into for some sort of productive ends, whether it's living well together in a place or pursuing a common task. As opposed to this, here we counterpoise this form of community as contract with the idea of community as solidarity. This is the idea that bonds of human togetherness and solidarity cannot be contained by choices or by places. So we see that rather than solely being formed around a purpose or emerging within a container space of surrounding territory, community is revealed through bonds of solidarity and emergent purposes that align, realign constantly to make this whole thing very complicated for us. Thank you.